Good. So we saw that the Inyan van Elam is the Kedusha. At Kol Shemamayla, the Inyan of Kedusha was B'teikev. In other words, the Elokiyah was B'teikev at Giloi. And the Kelim were B'teilim Megamrei Lelakus. And Kol Sheha Yered Lamata, particularly from Atzilus into Bria, Yitzir Vasiya, already that's Inyan van Elam is Nivroim. It's Yered Umismayet mi Olam la Olam mi Madrega la Madrega. And we saw especially that Atzilus, Mitzad Pnimis Atzilus was Meir Afila the Inyan for Keser, especially as he brought down the Befrat Inyan Atik, but that's Pnimis Atzilus, Pnimis Abu, Pnimis Atik Davka. And that was Mitzad the Beetle. Well, that was we began the whole chapter with the Hachroza, that the Klolas, Inyan, Kedusha was Pchinas Abitel. And where you have Beetle, so then there's a capacity, a possibility for there to be Gilead Mitzad the Kli, where the Kli is Botel, or Bamiradir is Meir Begolo in the Kli. And that was, we saw the whole Klolas of Elam as the Kedusha. However, we saw that in the Inyan from Sitra Achra, the Ika was the Inyan from Yeshes Ungasus, and that was the Inyan of Roishi Ish Chacham, but ein of Afila the Inyan of Chacham in the Umazeh. Even though Chacham is the Inyan shal Beetle and the Inyan shal Asoga, Mitzad the Inyan of Beetle, nonetheless, even the Inyan of Chacham over there is Chacham Ba'ein, in other words, Machzik Yasatzmei L'Chacham Godel. We saw the Inyan of the Agosha, even in the Inyan of Moichin and the Inyan of Chachma. And the same with the Inyan of Midas. We can say that even more, but more Teikev in the Inyan Hamidas, that every Inyan is L'Gamayu Ein Ovdin, as we brought the Lashon from the B'Shem, the Talmidi Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai in the Gemara, that called Tivu, even though the Umas Ha'elam do the Inyan from Tivu, it's not worth denying the actual fact that they do Tivu, but the whole motivation and the whole pnimis of the Tivu is Galmayu. They do it for their own sake. And Zelter brings in Tanya another deal, Chaloshin over there, the same kind of Mochim Wahari, but the Kavanah Klali is the same. And therefore, that's the Klolas Inyan of Hashpoya, how it is Mitzad the Inyan of Klippers, that they expect the Inyan of the Makabel to realize how much Tov he's getting and to be to receive position and what you might call build up Mitzad the fact that they gave, or Mitzad the Hashpoya, which is Sof Kosov, the Amitis Kavana, and therefore in Kedusha, the Alter refers to in Tanya, in Perik Kof Daled, there uses the expression Kedusha Hamashpas. The whole meaning from Kedusha is Tavke Hashpoya, but the Hashpoya Mitzad the Beetle. Like we find by Rome Avinu, it's Tavke Mitzad the Beetle. In the Sitra Achra, the Hashpoya is only Mitzad the Yeshes for Gases, so therefore it demands that the Makabel will give a lot of thanks and be all the time stating his gratitude. B'kol sheyored b'madrega she'ein shoma the kedusha kol kach, about 2/3 of the way down the Omad, kol kach misgabe hayeshes the klipa. So we saw that the Seder in the elements of the Lumas is the opposite, that in the earlier elements, the Ike of Klippa, which is Argosha v'yeshes Atzmei, that's not so much birth, and there's more the Giluya Oyer of the Kedusha. Therefore, we saw the previous Ospariches, the Inyan of Klippa, Keneged HaAtzilas was the Inyan from Ri'uma, Inyan from Bittel, in the Bittel Gufa, Inyan from Argosha. And then we saw that in the elements, the Klippa, the Ika Inyan, which is Argosha Sayesh, develops as you go down. As you go further down, then you are misrachik more from the Geder of Malchus Tasiyev and the Etzim Geder HaKedusha. Therefore, the Yeshes and the Klippa becomes more Behis Gabras. Until you reach the Inyan from Olam Ma'asiyah, and we said that there is one that Inyan from his Gabras, and the Kedusha is so much Pamiyut that we find the Inyan of Atik the Klippa. Okemoi Benefesh, Arei Tukve the Nishmasa Chusha de Gufa, the Sibis Tukve the Gufa, Umi Chusha de Nishmasa. In other words, it's just like in Kedusha, where there's the Inyan from Gilu B'Toikev, then that requires and brings to a Chusha in the Kelim, in the Inyan from Argosha Sayed. Therefore, the Kelim are B'Teilim Legamre. So, in the other way around, where does it took for the Gufa, where the Kelim are in the form of Yesh and Matziyas, then that causes and that brings out only a Chusha de Nishmasa. It allows only a Gilu, the Neshama, or even Mukbal, and even from Golas, this is Mavoy and Kama Makaimes. The Kasher HaKoyres, the Nefesh Keys, Hain Behis Kalas, when it's like the Seder the Kedusha, that the Inyan of Oero Ki is Begolui, then Mizbatlim HaKoyres, the Nefesh Abami is, then the Mamela, or those Inyanim which call Inyanim is only Lahalim or Lahastia, we have any Emes and Matthias, Mitzadatzmon, is if the Koyres, the Nefesh Keys are Meir, then the Inyan of the Nefesh Abami is automatically is koiches amispatel, and they come in the form of chalishas. V'gam mizbarim u'mistachnim al yedei aveda. Not only that they're in a state of chalishas, but they also they even undergo a process of biru v'tikun through the gilui of the koiches of the nefesh elokim, particularly if it's al yedei aveda. In other words, that chalishas can anyway be of the Inyan for Tikkun and Birur in the Koyches of the Nefesh Abami, that requires and demands the Inyan of Aveda. And so we could say that the Maila of the Inyan from Aveda is that it's a Kilui, the Seder Masuda, with a Iskabers that comes mitzad the what you might call the effort that the Inyan from Aveda demands a toikif and a iskabris in kedusha beklal. Therefore, the koyches the nefesh elikisa is kilo in a state of tekifas and iskalas b'shas they come alidei avoida. And therefore, since they come in that way, then not only they keep the nefesh abamis down, but they even cause an imayim from tikkun. The sibas toikif on nefesh abami is, however, where we see the opposite as a toikif. Mitzad the koiches the nefesh abami is who mipnei yisalmus a koiches the nefesh elikis. That where the nefesh elikis the koiches say are going into a state of yisalmus, a inyan van helim, but that can only come mitzad as we saw either the inyan van heder aveda lofi hamuven mia mishpat akoidum, that through the Inyan of Heda Aveda, Bamela, there's not the Biru, the Tikkun, and then that leads to a further Inyan that even gives them the ability to be Mishkala in a form of Teicher, the Koyches of the Nefesh Abami is, therefore they cause a Yisalmes in the Koyches of the Nefesh Eliki. Or the Diuk is Davki Yisalmes. Not that the Koyches of the Nefesh Abami in any way really change the Nefesh Elikis. They only cause a chalishas benegel gilui, or not that they cause a heipach a tikkun, a heipach in the nefesh elakis, because she doesn't need any tikkun or anything of that nature. No, it causes a yisalmas. And similar to what the Alter Rebbe is Masbin Tanya Perek Yudalev, that the iskabris of the nefesh elakis doesn't cause chas v'chulil any change of the nefesh abamis. I'm sorry. And the koyches Torah don't cause any change in the nefesh elikis. All they cause is a yisalmus that the nefesh elikis is oila b'chinas makif miya guf miya kelim oimed b'chinas makif akol be'asor, like he brings the lashon. Ve'ilu in the other kivun, whereas it's gabus that the koyches the nefesh elikis, that they cause a isapches in the koyches of the nefesh abamis, but that's the tzaddik that he's mamish mahapet the rala Latei, in the Beinani Al-Kaponim, he keeps it in a state of Shina, dormancy, as we see over there in the earlier Prokim. The Pu'ula, the Nefesh Abamis, like Gabi, the Nefesh Elokis, is only to drive it in the Helen. Well, that's the Indian of the Lashon Yissalmos. Sheyesh b'seh kama chiluchim madreges, akamish kosim b'mokim achet. It can go in different stages and different oifanim, or that toikev, the Nefesh Abami is causing a retreat into Hillel on the part of the Nefesh Elokis.
It seems that he's saying the opposite. He's saying that the retreat of the Nefesh Elokis causes the strength of the Nefesh HaBahamis.
No. Well, I mean, that's what
it says here.
But that's not the Nakuda. What he's saying is that the Sivas are taken with the Nefesh Abamis, Mitnei Yissalmos HaKoyches Nefesh Elokis. So why would the Nefesh Elokis? Why would the Nefesh Elokis be Bisalmos? Why would the Nefesh Elokis go Bisalmos? The Nefesh Elokis is whole in the book in the Kufis to people Golov. Why would it go Bisalmos? What it means is that it's it's an ongoing process. That if the Nefesh Abamis causes B'lavochia, Yisalmos, it's the Nefesh Elokis, then she gains the upper hand. Remember, she causes more and more of the Yisalmos. You follow? In other words, it's a question of who is using the upper hand, who is using the union of the Ashpah.
Then it should have said the other way around. Sibas Hayisalmus HaKoyches Nefesh Elokis Mipnei Token Nefesh Bahamis.
Yeah, but that's what he's tying. What I'm trying to say is that's what he was trying to be medactic. What I'm trying to say is that how do you get a Yisalmus of the curse of the Nefesh Elokis? How does the curse of the Nefesh Elokis go into Yisalmus B'lavochi? Because B'tchila, that's what he said earlier. The trouble is you didn't listen carefully to what I was saying. We saw in the earlier sentence that through the Union of Avodah and all of those Inyonim, and that's what brings these Gabbas to the Nefesh Elokis. When there's a whole Seder that the Nefesh Elokis, it comes into Gilui, so then the two Inyonim. First of all, Chalishas in the Nefesh Abamis, and then afterwards in from Biro V'Tikkur. So in Cain, if the Nefesh Elokis says everything is good, then for the Nefesh Abamis should at least be B'Chalishas or Chopanim, even in Oivim from Tikkur. Therefore he says that the Sibber, why the Nefesh Abamis gradually is Hoylech U'Mizgaber, because of the Yisalmus of the Nefesh Elokis. Why would the Nefesh Elokis be Yisalmus B'Lavochi? So that's what I'm using the expression. It's an ongoing process. So Hinochanami does his emet. Why does the Nefesh Elokis continue going into a Yisalmus? Because the Nefesh Abamis is Hoylech U'Mizgaber. But for worse he does, because there's been the he'eder of the Inyonim Ne'amorim Niel. Merely the he'eder Inyonim Elo, the Nefesh Abamis causes, and then he becomes B'toike. Sheyesh b'zeh kama chiluchim madreges v'kamosh kosim achim achim. V'inyan atik the klippa, so we go all the way down into sof hamadreges at the oilemus the klippa, and we reach the inyan of atik the klippa. Yesh loima shezeu atayva shehi b'klirus. Shezeu kosher yesem me'achamimus atayva shehi b'spilus b'nefesh sheneicha yesem lehistakenu lehis apik. Avo taiva sheb'klirus shezeh inyan ataynug arizeh kosher yesem lehistakenu. This is in an Indian brought down in many places in Siddur, also in the Bossi Lagani. He talks about the Madregis in the Nefesh Abami. He also mentions the Indian, and that is that wherever there's a Ayin for Ishpailas, then it's always easier to deal with. Dainu in beide, in the Indian Kedusha, where there's a Ishpailas, then you can read that into deeper and higher madrigas. Where there's Ayin from Kliras, Yeah, so then there's a mile in Pnimis V'Atzmius, Amadreias in Chochma, which are the Indian from Kavalacha, Indian from Klirus. But in the Indian from Riyuma said, where there's his pilots, it's always easier to do something with. Because where there's his pilots, like the famous expression we once used, you can pull by the nose, his pilots. You know, Rav Nachum Goldschmidt used to say that. Where there's a cock, you know, you can sort of pull it by the nose, and you can be ma'avirat into a Indian shel kedusha. Over where there's Indian from what you might call heder, his pilots. So yesh lach, you know, mitzad, what is that? Mitzad, what is that Indian from heder, his pilots? So unfortunately, in the Indian of the Umazeh, people in Yonah, like we saw, they go down. They're not going up, but they're going down more into a Toikir. Then his pilots is one level. After you go beyond his pilots into Kriras, you go into a you know, Sheket, as you might call it. You're really in a deeper and more terrible situation. It's like the famous, you know, Balbata Shemosha, what they give. Once a man was going and he came to a biu, into a huge Mareches, a biu. You know what a biu, you know, how they call it, a sewer. You know, he was walking and then all of a sudden he came across a whole group of Bnei Adam that they were sitting in the sewer, you know. And they were, you know, making a sewer there. They're having a whole party, as you might call it, inside the sewer. And he was just miroyev, you know, from the Shrechel Raya, with the Avira, ability to that he could hardly hold out, you know. He just barely managed to get over to them, but he said, Gewalt, what are you guys doing here? You know, what on earth? Get out of here, you know, how can you eat and how can you, you know, be nana in a zamoke? So I said to him, Shmek, you know, what's wrong Shmek? Who says Shmek around here? It's perfectly normal, perfectly... In other words, that a person can become so misatzim mit a gewisse Sache that he's not mispoiled from it yoter. In other words, it's become so much part of him that he doesn't really realize just how deep and how makusha in the Zach he really is. And that's mitzad the Indian from. That's mitzad what we call time. That's kilo the makiv. That's what we're going to see in a minute. We're going to come back to the Ketores, the birur of the makiv. The darky word is ishkashras, which is already lamayla mikoches what you might call a gluim, and does it in more in the etzem. Therefore, it's all in an over from kilo clear as a person can even tine it to you. But there are mummy is you will even say, well, look, I know I'm not a big bal pilot in these it doesn't really bother me. But the fact that he tightens his ear, because deep inside he's mamish makusha in the Indian, betachlis ice kashas. And that's what he brings in Kuntus Avodah, the Rebbe. He brings over there in Perik Beis, then I get to the Indian from Istaklis, where Medafnish, was the dimension was his own, he brings over there, he writes over there, that Mistaklim Vo'imrim She'enim Mispoilim Mizeh. So the Rebbe said that's because they're so makusha in the Zach, that the Indian of the koiches are giluim, the koiches are normalium in the word comes. But Indians no longer need the Indian from these pilots because he's makusha be'etem in the Indian from oima ketayim. I say, if you look it up in very basic Kuntus Avodah, that's exactly what the Rebbe means here. The word the Yerida B'tuich Taivet has gone into a geda of clearance. It's no longer in a state of his pilots for koch. Well, that's a similar, not that it's already moving out, well, that's a sign that it's moved in, but and it's come to a point where you become so at home with it, mitzad the tfisa in the Inyanim of the Makiv, that you don't really need these pilots anymore. You're so makushin and Rahman in Islam. I mean, that's he said that's much more difficult to deal with in the Chamimas. The Chamimas, in the infinite pilots, his pilots is always a dover chitzayim, like we find in the Kedusha also. Yeah, the Av, which is B'chitayni, is Mispilas. Or the Av, which is B'chitayni, the Veikis of Miti, is not B'chitayni. But that's Mitzad the Goydel Ha'ilu, Ila Maila Maila. Or when we're talking about going Lamata, then it's in the opposite Oifen. Whereas the Eden from Kirilas, that's a sign that we'd be neufel into the Oimek, Ais Kashras, the Deratainu. we said that Taiva Shebekridus, Shazain in a Tainug, is a kosher Yesel is Take. It's the old idea of the stealing, how do you call it, the Bilti Balis Pilas. He's much more difficult to deal with than the Balais Pilas. And I was brought down. The truth is that this is Goivel. It's got a very strong kesher and a gvul to the Yin from Amalek. That's what's brought down. In Tzidus, the Yin from Amalek is the Yin from Kaliras. Why is he the Yin from Kaliras? Because he's kokach mitzad the Makiv at a clipper that he's in an oven from Kaliras. He doesn't need the whole his pilas. When I say he doesn't need the whole his pilas, he's much deeper past the Indian of his pilas. But his pilas is shot to the Sheva Midas, or they're the Sheva Umish, Sheva Ratzisah. Of Amonid, the Indian from Makiv, the Sibul of him, but not that he's really part of them anymore. And therefore the famous Moshe, the Friedrich Rebbe brings in our mind that you have the dogma of the Ish that he's misnagid to in Yoni, how they call it, Kedusha with a koch, and he complains about Kedusha and he tries to attack in Yoni Kedusha v'chulu, or if a emissary in from Gilead Kedusha, eine emissary Talmud Chacham, or something like that comes, and he tends to fall bottom, and he might even show a desire to assist the Talmud Chacham, or in Yonim Misug Zeh. In other words, all of a sudden he helps himself just how nourished he has been, or he is being, even though he's not mistaken ali dezel. Well, upon him, there's a bittul b'shas ma'aser. For ilu, somebody that's mamish, be'amitis, atkifas, he's much less mispoiled. He doesn't show any his pilot. Over he goes with a sinner, stuma, behaltna, koyach against ali in yonim and kedusha, and particularly those people they represent, the amitis in kedusha, as he's just got this obstinate, deep inner resentment to them, which doesn't have any shinui alidei, what they show, what they really represent. He just stays the way he is. Well, that's in the Nakud of Amalek. That's Bedakis. Ainen the Amalek, that's the Asher Kocha Bederach. We know that the two inyonim are close, one to the other. That's the rest of the puzzle. Over there in Pasha Maya, where it's written share of a kesef v'eis. Oh, I'm sorry, v'eis. The eis who are tuikiv sheblis pilers. As a kosher yesa misher nogach. In other words, share is brought down as the chamimas. Kesef is the inifan how they call it kesef v'rachmanis. It says it's a rahmanis. We have to give in. We have to do the inifan kilo from chalisha. But it's also a form of ispilus atayim, giving in to the time. And inifan shor nogach is the bren of the lumazet, the bren of the tainug. He said the imi yeshu hu boyait. He's lefei. He looks to be a davar mazi. Ach mitzada ispilus shaboy. But not lefei boy she is spoiled. Gam came in elo. That's what we saw in the moshe we just bought. From the Managi to Inyoni Kedusha, when it's with a brennan, with a kocha, with a isnagdas, with an open, complaint, okay, when all of a sudden he sees it's maya into him, then it causes him from chalisha, even a from shinui, and he can even be mispoiled, b'shas ma'aser, as we said, and want to have a kesher with that Talmud Chacham, or with that Indian, what the Talmud Chacham represents, v'chulu. But he said the union and that's the union of drawing the nose. Whatever is these pilots, you can sort of pull it and bring it, because it's a moving thing. It's a levity gazach. And whereas it's levitikite, you can inject into the levitikite the emser shorish or makir of the levitikite. And ever he says, va'is she'enu boyed. Age doesn't attack, with the how do you call it, goring attacks. The famous idea of the obstinate goat, that just stands b'makomer and refuses to to move. Who betekent meid al mekoyme? That's the marshal. The kosher lifoyer boy, and it's very, very difficult to cause any. Even if you call out you'll beat the goat, or you'll try to move him around with all sorts of forms of persuasion. He just remains where he is. Believe call his pilots mimcha. I think it's even brought in some places. You can even show him some sort of foods that normally he would like. But if he decided that he's not going to move, even if you show him food, he doesn't move. In other words, the dvarim ha-me'orim is pilots mitzad tekev ha'achlata sheboy lo mo'erim is pilots. But that's the inyan of the iskashus bim koim zeh mitzad kol etzem inyan. That's the inyan of klirus in the nefila into the taivas mitzad what it becomes nitfas the makiv of the taiva, and that makiv being in phenomenon is like an immovable iskashus, just like we find Abdullah many Abdullahs that in the Indian Kedusha, when a mensch experiences a tremendous time of ruchni, like a nigun nifla or his brain and his amuka, he can sort of move into a situation where you can't how to call it, gain his attention or win his pilots mishum dover. And like they tell the famous story about the Mittler Rebbe, when he was kavior young, when he was a young man. That once the Chassidim came into a shul, and the Mittler Rebbe was davening in a corner, but he was in the middle of a starke dveikis, but tefillah, and all of a sudden came in the mashamish of the shul or wherever he was, and he wanted to clean out. He had to clean the shul, and so they saw he was cleaning out. He's getting close to the Mittler Rebbe. What's going to be here? It was a Uzhiva time. So what the two Chassidim was that they knew how to handle the situation. They walked over and they picked the Mittler Rebbe under the elbows. So if you lift a person up if he's sitting like that, you lift him up under the elbows, then you can be much clear. And they were gesund chevra, and he wasn't very heavy, the Mitzvah. He didn't have much on him. So they just walked over, they lifted him up, they carried him over to the next room, which he'd already cleaned the guy, or he wasn't going to clean that, and they just planted him down in the Cheder Sheni, and he was just mamshik b'li kol his pilot's cloud, the Mitzvah. Yeah, you do the simple. That's the same meaning. It's similar in the Indian for Kedusha. That the take of Uinig demands a complete indifference mitzad the Indian dveikis, that there's no Indian for his pilot's cloud. In the nefila mitzad the liyuma, somebody who's been noifer kokach into the infant, and he says, I'm not mispoiled. I don't mind, I can look at these things and it doesn't bother me. Or other das is a siman muvach, and das is a siman amiti, and so they call it lichtin pechel tiv. He's deep inside the Indian, and that's the Indian of the age that he's not really attracted by anything. State bim koyim. Sure.
Maybe when we saw him, there's an union in making an ez into a shor nogach.
Yeah.
Maybe some people that are indifferent to doing mitzvahs, maybe there's an union get them angry to get them into shor nogach, and then you can.
You get them angry, and then you can maybe pull them in a little bit. You get them out of the careers into some sort of his pilot. Although sometimes it's difficult to make that step. Maybe it takes. I think maybe what would have been easier to say maybe is that those who complain a bit at the beginning, it's easier to get them, or those who are just legamre, it's difficult to deal with them on the spot. So that's one view. There's one Indian in the Yerida into the Teikah for the Klippers, where it's only Teikah to Makiv, or that's Indian from Krill. Now so there'll be another idea. Gam Yeshli. The Atik the Klipper, or that Indian von Oinig Pnimi of the Klipper, or that Makiv Pnimi of the Klipper, who are Tuf Tam der Geschmack Binyone Oilo. In other words, the mensch is a connoisseur. Not just he likes a bit of oil myself. He's got a tooth time, and the guy said, he'll be Masbi and a mile of a David. In other words, he's got in the edge of India for oil, it doesn't matter what, it can be in food, it can be other, in Vojno, he's got a tooth time in him. He's got a geschmack, a tooth time. So the Rebbe said that that's also the Atik, the Klippa. In Yonah Oilam, she said, Mokeh kol tekev atayivas. מפני שיש לו עיטוב טעם בעצם בעניינים החומריים והתענוגים הגשמיים. In other words, I'm addicted them to some, how do you call it, connoisseurkeit, and everything has to fit and it's more than a skate tooth, how do you call it, tooth time. Amamir said the Rebbe, that's like a ishkashus atzmi, and that causes giluim in all minisot. Taiva's proti.
Well, how do you get rid of this tooth down?
Baltimore said, well, Ramira said that's another Indian in Atik the Klippa. In other words, that there's an Indian of Tainug. Tainug, what you might call, sweeps a person up into a state of clearness, and what you might almost call in a form of devekes. And then there's another. And that's kilo, almost beli shita, aim to say hezbollah, you just leave me alone, even Tyler said it doesn't really bother him anymore, the guns. I would say the Rebbe, that's mitzadoim ka'ishkashis, is another oifen, that Tainu and Makif express themselves, which is taki in how do you call it, an expressive oifen, not in an oifen for nogach, also not in an oifen from his pilers, or in an oifen from, having a sort of a Havana and a tooth time, being a maven in the for Taiva. And it's not so much the Taiva, but it's a meaning that the world is a gishmak in it, to be in the world, be the whole in. And some people say, what's life worth if you don't, if you don't really have a good time, you don't really enjoy it, you're not really into the whole thing. What's it worth? And maybe let's have an enjoyable life. Let's have a good time. Or they're Indian for living in the Etchem Nakuda that this world was given for Gishmak. That's what you're here for. Or that's another form of the Makif of the Indian Hatayim. It's a fairly big example. Yesh loimer in Tainu Gufa mitzadeh. It's like two Indian. There's the Indian for the what you might call the Aliyah, the Hafshata of the Tainu, and then there's another Indian like the Shitta, and the Slavshas of the Tainu in Dvarim Misavim. And both of them says the Rebbe Nishkit, both of them taken next. And he said there's a simon that the mensch is Makusha Omrik b'taking Yonei Aklipa.
Why is the second one called Makif? The quote of Makif is something that's topes you. You're not topes you.
I think you should have been listening. What we're saying is that it's not just a prat, that the whole mensch is like that. The whole being, Zainam, is Makusha. That's what we pointed out. That when the Shoah does, that certain pratim, certain inyanim was caught. Or when he just doesn't move and there's no his pilot, that's a sign that his whole etzem is there. The ganze mensch liegt in there. And that's what, if you look up in Perek Beisel, that's what he's masber. That's what we brought down. That was the whole point. The Davki, where there's a head of his pilers, that's a similar, the whole maki for the mensch is totally, and his whole being liegt in there. And therefore it doesn't matter to him, one way or the other, that's what he says. The emphasis is that that's because that's what he is. And there who's that? And in the Indian, what we just described, it's in another direction. It's like the tooth time clothing, that the whole world is a gishmacha place, and that's what we're here for, to be in the gishmacha development. And that's what I try to point out. It's like two movements in Oinig. Oinig is sometimes have shorter, and sometimes Oinig is like expression. But that means that that's what you are be'etzem. And that's what I don't want to repeat the whole thing again, but that's what I was mishtadel to say, that therefore the mensch, he says that that's what life is all about. We're here to enjoy ourselves, to appreciate, to be involved in the world. And that's just his whole being in the world, a kilo mechotonim. So says the Rebbe, so in an aktoides, שהוא לברס המחיף תלבוינו, דהיינו, like we described earlier, that's the Indian from Atik to Klipa. The lavoino, that's the Indian of the kesher, kilo, which are the Indian of pshitas, and almost lavnuni is the etzevis kasher. In the Indian Arab, that's Indian from Atik to Klipa. So the Keturis comes to be literally mavarer that. In other words, to elevate and take out the tuf tam and the gishmak from the world, and to take the etzem back bim koimoy. Who likach es a tuf tam shem binyonim achumiyim ulavatel atzrilus hanal. In other words, at the pool of the keteras is to take those inyonim and return them to their right place. In other words, the keteras has the power to schlep out the makiv and put it back into its right place. If you get to the etzem siba of the Indian, and the Taki brought down the Russian siba in the Silas. But again to Amolik, Mizbatli Mamela Hatayves Sha'ena Betoikev Vagam Mizbatliim. Yeah, in other words, not only they lose the takev, but they lose the whole Geder Hammer Matthias. I mean, that's what we find. The famous story with Shmuel Monkis by Alter Rebbe was about to be taken into prison. You know the whole story that the night before, and the Alter Rebbe knew they were already coming. They knew they were already. I mean, they'd already been there by days, so they were hiding somewhere, waiting for to take him the day after. And so he asked Shmuel Monkis, should he go? You know, this famous Indian that he knocked on the door. It was late at night. And the Alter Rebbe opened a little thing to see who was there. And he said that he identified himself. So the Alter Rebbe said to him, you know, what do you think? I should go. And so Shmuel said, what's the question? Was it a shaila? So he said, Tasakona. Tasakona is nefoshes. Yeah, so he said, the famous, what he called, Mimonov. He said, Monov, is it your Rebbe? Yeah, so can be able to harm you if you're an emissary, Rebbe. Then they won't be able to do anything to you. If you're not a Rebbe, then he said the famous, the original Lashon is, then it's due to you a bullet. It's kumtai coil. That means it's due to a bullet for having taken away the tooth tam. That was the expression. They took away the whole tooth tam. You've taken away that gut, what you might call enjoying life, the being in the world, that's it, having a good life. That's a good thing, but you gotta face the responsibility of having done so. You gotta take on yourself that was your tafkid. Yeah? If you're not a Rebbe, how come you did that? How come you had the right to do it?
But I don't feel that they took away the tuf tam yet from me. They didn't. I don't feel that the Rebbe has taken away from me the tuf tam.
Oh, you don't? Oh, yeah. Well, I think you're probably being just a little bit, the Kohanim are Anshe Chesed, probably the Anovim, Vayosfu Anovim, V'Havaya Simcha. You're probably trying to be a bit of an honor. I don't know if it's Anova, you try to be a little bit of an honor. This is Zichad, that everybody's learned Chassidus and everybody learned Tom Chetimim. He feels that, he may have his weak moments, he might sort of get slipped a little bit occasionally, here and there. Oh, but deep inside he knows that the whole thing is not worth it. He knows who the emes was it a time. Emes? That's in the Kudah. Yesh Regoyim, Yiseh Chazochim, Yiseh Toivim, to say that somebody who has a kesh with Lubavitch and Chassidus and whatever doesn't feel that the tooth time of the world has been taken away from him somewhat, then Otto Bishutfani is Kina. לבטל הקריאוס הנ"ל ועל ידי זה מזבטלים ממילא הטייבס שהם בתכף וגם מזבטלים. וזהו על ידי האביידה בבינס מקיפים שבנפש. Well, that's all Indian is well known. Of Chassidus, Inyan is Chabad, or Sof it's Indian is really the Inyan at the Etzem HaNefesh, at the Makim of Chai Yechida, Kitur, Amavur, Bekam HaMakim in Tanya, Kol HaMakim. וזה על ידי העבודה בבחינת מקיפים שבנפש, שזה פועל בעצם המהות ככוח המסעבר. What כוח המסעבר, the nefesh הבאמיס, how he is. Interesting. That expression, כוח המסעבר, that occurs in the Drushim Paraduma. Or that wasn't koyach hamisaver, or that occurs in the Kutitera, but again to the Drushim from Paraduma. We're just coming from Paraduma. And had we been Zrizim, we would have left this little piece in the Monday before Pasha Para. But what should we do? We're learning in the Monday after Pasha Para.
It's 3 days after Shabbos. It's still considered Shabbos.
Yeah. Up until Yom Shlishi. So we're still doing all right. We're getting into Yom Shlishi, but we haven't quite made it yet. Is a matter particularly in Tfilas Arvis und die ganze Ariche. The Fiese kommt is that the whole union of what the Nefesh Abami is really about is that Koyach HaMisava HaPoshum. It's only that he has Levushim, and those Levushim can even be Levushim Atzmiyim, not just Levushim Chitanium, and they can take over the whole Koyach HaMisava. However, the union of the Ketores, not just you take off the Stam Levushim, but you might say, to use the expression, you move him completely into another Geder altogether. And his whole Inyan of Chuka and yearning, what that's the Inyan of Misaveh, is only to Inyoni Kedusha. Hine Aveda Be'er Pnimi, Shehu B'meir V'olei Poel B'nefesh HaBa'am Yisrak Ispashtes Shor. Oh, that's exactly the word. That the Koyach HaMisaveh has got in himself a Ispashtes, and it's got a Pshitas. אבל בכדי לקח הטובתם ענייני העולם הזה, שזהו ביטול בעצם מהות כרך המסעבר. In other words, that he changes completely what that, ultimately speaking, the union of the tzaddik, or upon him that he becomes nizaz בעצם מהות from the whole shita of טובתם בעולם הזה, זהו דווקא על ידי עבודה בכרך מקיפים, או בכרך עצמיים דנפש, וזה עניין הכתוב. That's the union of the Keteras. What it indicates the union from the Makiv, the Kedusha. What that's the Ma'ira. Mavatil those Makivim. I'm sorry, Mavara. Or Mavatil those Makivim Adaya Mitzad Eliyum Hazeh. ועל-ידי זה ממשיכים בקדושה בחינת אור עצמי, שזה עניין השם. That's a furthering. That's only a new step forward.
You skipped the line. I think maybe you skipped the line.
I skipped the line? Yeah, I'm sorry. אבל בידי לקח טובתם ענייני המעלה, זה שוב ביטול בעצם מהות כרך המסעבר. זהו דווקא על ידי עבודה בכרך מקיפים או בכרך עצמיים דנפש. No? Oh yes, I did. וזה עניין, התורה שמבררים היוד א' כסורים דנויגה. דהיינו להוסיר בחינת המקיף the Ike Chiyusam. I will mafaya earlier in the Maimon that the Ike Maki, the Ike Chayus, and the Ike Achiza is through the Inyan of the Maki. That in the Liyumazeh, the Chayus Pnimi is only a Dora Muat, but there are Golus, the Ike which holds them, the Ike which gives them their whole Chayus to be even from Teikiv, in whichever direction it may be, whether it be in the Indian from Kriyas or the Indian from Kamimas, or that's Mitzad the Makiv, as we saw. Ike Chayusim in Mitzad the Makiv, and therefore it's Yud Aleph, like we had the whole Arichas in the end of the previous Maimah and early in this Maimah. And therefore, that's the Indian of the Keteidas, which is also Yud Aleph. And its Indian is to be Mavara, the Yud Aleph Kisorim. The Noiga, in other words, the union, the Ike there is the union of the Yud Aleph. And here he calls all of the spheres the union from Kesarim, like the Elder brings it in Tanya, Perik Vav, that he calls all of them Kesarim, even though there's Pnimium and there's the Ike Machif, which is the Lavena Zako, but nonetheless we call all of them Kesarim, mitzad the fact that each Inyan, how it is in the Nefesh HaBamis, is with a Teikiv, which Sofkosof, even in the Pashtas, has in itself a certain guilty cheshbon, as you might say. It's like a Inyan from a Kesef. It doesn't know of anything else. It's not really interested in other Inyanim. And that's a Inyan from Kilo each one of them is a and that's mitzad the shurish and toyer. Through the union of the makifim, that's the toidas, then mavara the etzim koyach the koyach misaver, not just the pashtas, but the etzim union or pshitas of the koyach misaver. Now I use the word pshitas because that's what's more over there in the Kuti Torah. That Be'emes he's a koyach poshut, and in him a maluvish common levushim. And in that kufa, there's two different levels of toiket. There's kila the inyonim which are pashtas, and then there's inyonim which are more shayach to be koyivish etzim shaloi. But if you're meisier and you're lokeach mishal, call a inyonim, then he goes back to certain shitas that he has, and then it's possible to bring him what that's the union of the paraduma, the second aspect, as you might call it. Yam Shochas Mayim Chayim No Kegli. For the first Indian, that's the Sreifas Apor. Aber Likdei Likach Atuf Tam in Yona Elamaze, Shazo Bitul Be'etzem Mahuskach Hamisave, Zo Davke Ale De Avede, Bekechetz Makifim, or Bekechetz Atzmiyim Danefesh. Veze Indian Aketoires. Shemavalim Ayuda of Ksorim, and we were just Mavaya. Why all of the pratim are called ksorim, even though the ikka is the koyach hayud aleph, because all of them have a certain toikiv mitzad shorsham b'toihu, dahainu lohosi b'chinas ha'makif v'ikka chiyusam. Like we pointed out Barichas earlier in the Maimon. V'alidei zeh mamshichim b'kedusha b'chinas oyer atzmi shezeh inyan Hashem. In other words, yesh loima that's already another inyan. Not yesh lema, those are the pirush moving. That alidei, what you reach the pshitas of the koyach hamisave, and the ikka, what you might call a bilbul of the order, that is nimshach achrei in yona elam hazeh, what that can be in a form of his pilot, or even worse, it can be in a form of makiv. Once all that has been misbatil, what that's the ikka inyan, the ketoilis. Then there's a further inyan, which dark is nimshach into pnimios, but it comes from a level in makiv which is maybe even more pnimi than the level of the ketoros itself, and that's the union of the shemen, and that's what we began earlier in the Maimah here with the lashon shemen or ketoros, the samach leiv, the union darkim is the union of shemen. And the Rebbe is mavaya that that's a hemshech achrei the bira the minyan hakitoros. First of all ketoros, and then it's the inyan Hashem. Ukeneida the shemen sof al kol hamashki. But that indicates that it's the inyan of chokma beklal shenikra shemen, but there are prat umokir chokma. In other words, not stam chokma. Why it's tzaf? Well, tzaf is the inyan for our makiv kibbutz, but that's the inyan of mokir chokma. Or Kameshikosav Shemen Mishchas Koidesh. That there's an inyan in Shemen where it draws down Koidesh, Mishchas. If I'm watching Mosheach and Mamshich, the Koidesh is Ubchinas Chochma. The Rebbe suggests that maybe that's a inyan for Chochma. That word is kilo mistakes inyan for Chochma. The Koidesh Ubchinas Chochma. But we'll see in a minute it's the from Chochma Stimor, the Mokeh of the from Chochma. Okay, Meshikosu, Shmartem es HaShabbos, Ki Koidesh Hu. And it's well known that Shabbos is Moichin de Abba, the from Chochma, and the Pnimius, the Mokeh from which Shabbos gains that Koyach, is from the union of Koidesh. And it's well known the difference between Koidesh and Kodesh. Well, Kodesh is a Shema Toyah, which Al Chaponim has a vav, which is indicatory of a certain shayras between a machif with a pnimi. There's a higher point, which is machif, but it's nimshach b'toich ha-pnimi, kadosh. That's a machif ha-koreh, which Al Chaponim can be nimshach into the pnimi. And then there's a inim for koidesh, mila begalmei, says the Zohar, that's a word in its own right. It's the Shema Etzem koidesh, but that's indicatory of machif ha-amiti. And that's the inyan shemen mishchas ushomeach es hakodesh shemen mishchas kodesh. In other words, that the shemen is mosheach es hakodesh, Who begins Chochma Stimoa. So in other words, you got two inyanim. You got the inyan from Shemen is more a Chochma how it comes begolul, but it's Moisheach from a Madrega Ne'eloma v'Yeza, what that's inyan from Chochma Stimoa. So it's well known, a Chochma Stimoa has in itself, as we saw earlier, a tremendous milah that Chochma Stimoa is kira the Iker Mamuta and the Iker Dora Makasha between the Amitis in the Makifim and the Pnimiyim. And in other words, Mitzad Pnimis Chochma Stimoa is really the Makif Akiyelium, but that's in an Atainu, as we saw earlier. So Davki through the inyan of Ketaylet, that you mavatal the achiza of the makifim to liyumazeh, and they literally fall away and they allow the koyach amisavet to stand b'pshitusay, or then it can be matched the inyan of pnimis ve'atzmiyas amakif to kedusha, which is really chochmas dimor, because alidei chochmas dimor is the gilo of all the inyanim makifim how they are in kedusha. That's a mile of Chochma that albeit it's Pnimi, it's got a shaylas to the Inyan and say from Pnimi, but it shares is in Makif Elyen. Amamela, that's the Inyan of Shemen, which is now Nimshach, Acharei, in other words, that by being Mavatal, the Achiza, at the Makifim, the Liyumazeh, you can be Megala, the Amitis, Makif of Kedusha. And that's the pshat kodesh, moved out be'eter. V'hainu, he said, Gilu b'chinasoya achmi, shemoved out be'erach min ha'ishtav. So it's not just a makif, it's something which is moved out be'eter min yonei, the pnimis v'achmi is ha'oinig ha'ariz mitzad the von Elikus. Amamela, that's nimshet davki already bittul mahus ha'nefesh ha'amin. What do we mean by mahus? We mean etzem, in the makifim of the Liyumazeh. And once we've been mevatel, beetle, in that, then we can be megale the amitius inyan of the makif, the kedusha, which anyway comes b'der pnimius. And that's the inyan from Chochma Stimoa. V'nimshet davke al yevzeu shemen u'kteres yisamach leiv shalidei ha'aveda the keteiras ממשיך מבחינת שמן גירוי עצמוס היוצא שעל ידי זה ישמח לב אדם העליון. So in other words, that's nimshach even into the midas, and that causes the inyan from gilui ha'ava and the inyan from midas are being even from pnimius ha'midas, like before. Kutitem pasha ba'aleishcho, the davki mitzad the inyan the menorah, that's the inyan ha'shemen. Then the Sheva Midas are Mishkala Mitzad Pnimius Amidas Mamash. Remember, that's the inyan in Samach Lev, when it's Nimshah Mitzad Mishchas Kodesh, or that wakes up the inyan of Pnimius Amidas, and therefore it's the inyan from Simcha in the Midas area in Odom HaElyon in Atzilus. Remember, I think we'll have to hold there for this evening, because there's things that I need to take care of. He goes on to say that that's the inyan of Shmini Atzeres. Shmini Atzeres is that Shemen, or that Gilui, and the whole inyan of Sukkot up to Shmini Atzeres, like the beetle of all the inyani del Yumazeh, the Makifim. But that's that everything begins. All the Hamshoches from Sukkot begin from the Makif of the Keteiras that was in the Kodesh HaKadoshim on Yom Kippurim, Kiyadua. And the Chiddush is that that's even mashpia on the korbanos which are offered in the Beis Hamikdash, and that caused that not only the inyan pnimim in the korbanos, but even the inyan hamakifim of the liyumazeh were misbatel through the gilui of the ketayras. And then there was inyan from Shmini Atzeres, Shmini from Rosh Shemen, the amitis Hashem, the magid of Ketaycha, Shmini from Rosh Shemen. Odemos wird nimmt die Mitis Makif, aber he comes Tavki b'der Pnimius, and Snimshit Lamata, and then he mentions even the inyan from Simchas Torah, or that's inyan Arot Lam, and Snimshit Ad Lamata, and then it becomes Yiyu L'chol Avadecha v'Ein L'Zorim Itov, that becomes Nimshit, but Pnimius Tavki L'Neshomas Yisrael, even though that's a Makif Aki Elin, inyan is Tavki Shaykh to the inyan from Pnimius, but that's a Yidin. Aber mir Omen Kenya he Rotzen and asked us all the unbelievable Shiloh, what are we waiting for any more. You know, what can possibly be anything else to be done, as the Rebbe said. I mean, I'm not saying that the Rebbe said that really nothing else can to be done. You know, everything's been done. What are we waiting around for? There's some whore. I'm still trying to work out what is that here. You know, it's a whore. We have to just pray. This year it's all Shabbos. It's Shabbos before Shabbos Pesach, and we fly from the infant Oineg into the infant. What are we waiting for? Really, Ad Mosai.